last time I think I played I have realized the last time.
So get your notes ready and when I get coming out of that.
Okay. Good Testing 1, 2, 3. Are you hearing me, everyone? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the University of the West Indies Global Campus, our Heritage Month lecture. Thank you so much, Nick. Always need the technical people. All right, Dr. Fraser to the head table. Distinguished Dr. Fraser. And our distinguished lady, of course, Miss Lackram as well. All right, I'm gonna see if I get this right. Miss Ellis, Booty Gon Yon to you. That's good. Good night in Garifuna. All right, so give me a little round. All right, we tried. All right, like I said, good evening, welcome, Booty Gon Yon to you as Gunyon. Thank you very much, Father Mark. And we just want to welcome you here this evening to this distinguished event. A people without a knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Marcus Garvey. So we are glad that you have come here, planted in the roots of the UE Global Campus, a foundation that is strong. And we thank you everyone for coming out as seeds and seedlings here. We welcome the distinguished audience, first of all. We welcome area representative, of course, Fitz Bramble. Let me just follow protocol on my, yes. Oh no, let's follow the invocation, you see? The invocation, of course. So let's welcome Mr. Ronnie Daniel. Firstly, let's get the presence of God first. Yeah. Yes, let's get the presence of God first, and then we go into details. Ronnie, go ahead.
Let us all stand. In this month of our heritage and heroes and sheroes, let us just spend a moment in silence as we recall those who have been defenders of this place we call home. And even as we think of this homeland, let us also think about those who have nurtured us, our own individual families, our communities, etc. We also think of those who have left us, but have indeed left a legacy, a foundation for us to build on. Creator and creating God, we give you thanks and praise for allowing us this wonderful privilege to meet, to come apart from our schedules this Holy Week, to reflect on our past, to reach deep into our past, but also to plan for the future and to build this place that we call home. We invite your presence now among us. We ask that you may guide our thoughts and our actions, even in our reflection. We pray that you may nudge us, you may create in us a renewed strength and vigor to build this nation that we so love. We ask you now to bless us as we participate in this Heroes and Sheroes lecture. We ask you to open our hearts so we may receive you. And in the end, we ask that you may nudge us and stir our minds and our hearts so we may recommit to build this nation of ours. Bless all of us gathered here, our families near and far, We thank you for allowing us safety to this place. We ask you to open our minds as we engage, as we reflect, so that we too may be refreshed and revived and be strengthened as we celebrate. Bless the one who shall lead us in reflection and all those who shall partake or participate in this event. May it be to your honor and to your glory and to the building up of each other and our communities and our nation. This is our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Yes, we're singing together. Yes, I don't know if Sina is here to play. So, all right, so we now stand for the national anthem, and we will sing lustily together, very lustily. 1, 2, 3. Saint Vincent, land so beautiful, with joyful hearts we pledge to thee our loyalty and love, and vow to keep you ever free. Whatever the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and goodness and keep us through. High roof of fair and blessed land, your mountains high so fair and green are home to me, though I may stray, a haven comes to me. Whatever the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us through. Our little sister islands are those gems, the lovely remedies upon their seas and golden sands. The sunshine never beams. Whatever the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us true. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, oftentimes we like to hear it play, but there's nothing like it coming from inside. So once again, we thank you. So once again, let me welcome you. My name is Sharon Garraway. I'll be your chair this evening, and it certainly is a pleasure. I'm the marketing assistant, acting, and so we welcome MP for the area, Mr. Fitz Bramble. We also welcome Minister Jones of the Anglican Church, Father Jones and his lovely wife. We also welcome Father Mark De Silva as well from the Roman Catholic Church. We welcome as well President of the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, Zoila Ellis Brown. And we also welcome President of the Teachers Union, Mr. Ellsworth Robertson. As well, we also, of course, the head table, Mrs. Lackram, who is officer in charge. We welcome her. And most notably, the featured speaker this evening, Dr. Adrian Fraser. So we welcome everyone here, the SVG Drum Association, everyone who's turned out, the media, we thank you, and those online as well, we thank you for tuning in. Blazer Williams, a lot of cultural persons here. Once again, we thank you for coming out. So next on the program, we go straight into it, not sticking at all. Mrs. Lackram, officer in charge of the UE Global Campus. Welcome, Ms. Lackram, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Protocol having been established, permit me to adopt that. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and happy National Heroes Month. Welcome to the annual National Heritage Month lecture presented by the University of the West Indies Global Campus, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is always a pleasure to see familiar faces and to have the opportunity to welcome new ones. I wish to thank you for attending, and I do encourage you to participate in the question and answer period following the main presentation. I am particularly pleased to welcome our guest lecturer for this evening, Dr. Adrian Fraser, historian, author, and past head of the UWI Global Campus, who graciously agreed to present this lecture on a subject dear to his heart. There has been much debate over the years surrounding the topic of a national hero. Specifically, who should be considered a national hero? What qualities should this person possess? How do we measure their contribution to society? And even, how many should we have? There was widespread embrace of the decision to designate the Honorable Joseph Chatterjee, Paramount Chief, as our first, and to date, only national hero. The discussion is resurrected every March concerning the identification and declaration of another national hero, with several prominent names being offered up as worthy candidates. The designation of March 14th as National Heroes Day, commemorated by the laying of wreaths at the obelisk at Dorsetshire Hill, the annual International Garifuna Conference, now in its 11th year, and the pilgrimage to Baliso seek to reinforce on our collective consciousness the sacrifices and resilience of our forefathers, and remind us, in the words of tonight's presenter, from whence we came. We owe it to the generations, both present and future, to clearly articulate the meaning, relevance, and importance of a national hero and a National Heroes Day. We must move past the storytelling of the former and the public holiday lure of the latter, and ensure that our people are grounded in the lessons of the past, which, by judicious application, give bright hope for the future. I trust that we would all leave this hall tonight with a greater appreciation and understanding of our individual roles and responsibilities in strengthening, enriching, and expanding the national discourse surrounding this topic. Thank you again for coming, and do enjoy this evening's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Lackram. Give her another round of applause. And she pointed out from whence we came, the importance of from whence we came, from that coined phrase from Dr. Fraser himself. Okay, let me apologize. Always something that might go a little, let's say, not wrong, but challenging. Maxine Brown, who is on the program, cultural officer, she had a lot of meetings today, and she sincerely apologizes for not being here, all right? But good news, she sent the drummers. The SVG Drum Association is here to do a cultural piece for us, and we'll ask them to do so right now. There's a representative? Okay, come right up. Okay, wonderful. You see how Maxine thinks? So thank you so much. Come forward. So, what's your name there? Tia? Tia Seals is here representing the Ministry of Culture. Welcome her. Thank you.
everyone. Mr. Ronnie Daniel, Program Officer 2 at the UWIGC, Ms. Sharon Garaway, Marketing Assistant, Mrs. Camille Lockhart, Officer in Charge at the UWI Global Campus, Mr. Adrian Fraser, Historian, author, and former head of the UWI Open Campus, Honorable Fitz Bramble.
Always something that might go a little, let's say, not wrong, but challenging. Maxine Brown,
Of the Chief Cultural Officer, Ms. Maxine Marvin Brown, at the Department of Culture in the Ministry of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development, and Culture. For years, the department has collaborated with the University of the West Indies on this venture and today's lecture on National Heroes and Heroes Day, meaning and significance, what's next, is no exception. We are elated that such a topic was chosen. It could not have been any timelier, especially during this month of Heroes and Heritage. Culminating with this activity, again, I reiterate that this topic could not have come at a better time.
there's a request. Always something.
And all intentions, as we remember and celebrate those who fought for our freedom and rights as a nation. Yes, and having a National Hero, and Heritage Month dedicated to them is just as important. I know we would all agree, and it brings
Association is here to do a cultural piece for us, and we'll ask
as well to thank the UWI Global Campus for their continuous collaborations with us, as well as the Department of Culture in the Ministry of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development, and Culture. Congratulations again on tonight's lecture. May we all embrace the commitment of our historian, Dr. Adrian Fraser, and may we all have a fruitful discussion at the end. Indeed, Heroes and Heritage Month, let's celebrate and embrace the past as we forge ahead for the future.
Thank you so much, Ms. Seals. And as she mentioned, we have to embrace and remember the commitment of our very own Dr. Fraser. All right, so we go straight into it. A cultural piece from the SVG Drum Association. And we thank them for being here this evening. So you might have one or two chairs that you could utilize for the drummers. And these African drums, you'll get the feeling of heritage. You will get the passion of this month. SVG Drum Association.
don't operate like they're ready to go. Toast to rubber double in the people. Ladies to them, let them want no respect. Him a papa and him a daddy. Wrong them like what them a choosing everything. They never chat real facts and theory. Choosing them now, but it's their expense. Mad over we want gents a rush with them not drop it in their one next. Choosing them always look at them high. When them done wrong party, them a feel old panty. When them done lick a dust, they have to take it. Never chat nothing about this operation. All them have to them a done that them. So they chat about weapon and ammunition. Them they got to snap past destruction. Teach you to them. Teach you to them right. Now chat to them and I don't like your services. Teach you to them. Teach you to them right. Now chat for them to them. You tell them listen. Teach you to them. But I must say they're not a big already, but them not chat facts and true reality. They say they're big, bad, rough and them tough. Wrong they make them just laugh, the button and lyrics, and just the lyrics, you know that is super. Them a ruling dancer since you work a child. Choose the right now, this woman looks fine. Sing them a sing, shot, a shot. Car where you drive, politics close where you whip. Politics dollars the way you spend. Politics is on the brutal oppression. Politics, teach you to them. Teach you to them right. Now chat to your man and don't make yourself listen. Teach you to them. Teach you to them right. Now chat for fear for Jeff you to them listen. Teach you to them. Teach you to them. Listen, the boy love boy who praise the majesty, love in them heart. Them never see. Brother, them sister, them want to go kill it. Only Johnny know. And they are like, you create the universe. And everybody listen. Teach you to them. Teach you to them right. Now chat to your father, don't make yourself listen. Teach you to them. Teach you to them right. Now check for fear for them. You tell them, listen. Teach you to them. Teach you to them. Teach you to them. Teach you to them. Thank you. So we have to teach the youths them about our heritage, so we have to teach them right.
Thank you so much. SPG Drummers, thank you so much. Teach the youth them right. And I want you to enjoy yourselves. This is what it's all about here at UB Global Campus. We bring the culture, we bring the arts, we bring the heritage, and we bring the esteemed, prominent Dr. Adrian Fraser. And you know Adrian Fraser came by, don't tell him that, don't tell him that. But when we were there, he was looking like, Sharon, what's going on? A man of time, a man of making sure everything is put right. So let's get things going and in order. Next to the podium is the introduction from Mr. Ronnie Daniel, and he's the Program Officer 2, Experience at the UB Global Campus. Welcome him once again. Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Well, just to say that Dr. Fraser really needs no introduction. He has been doing this for over, 50 years? Or at least over 40 to be safe. But nonetheless, Dr. Fraser continues to surprise us and to, particularly with his writings, very simple and sharp, his articles as they appear in the Searchlight. And he continues to lecture up and down this country, and when he's called, across the seas. Dr. Fraser is a trained educator for over 40 years, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, Canada. He holds a Master of Philosophy in History from the University of the West Indies at Cable Campus, and also a Certificated Social Development from the Coady Institute in Nova Scotia. His PhD, he went back to the University of Western Ontario to read for his PhD. Dr. Fraser has held several positions. Of course, you know, he's a former head of the Open Campus, now the Global Campus. And of course, he was a master teacher. In those days, you used to call them undergraduate and graduate master at the St. Vincent Boys Grammar School. Of course, Dr. Fraser worked with the Caribbean Conference of Churches that you may not know, and among other things. His publications include Chatoyer, first national hero of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 2002. Then in 2016, the 1935 riots in St. Vincent, from riots to adult suffrage in 2016. And then from villain to national hero, Chatoyer and the early struggle for independence in 2019. This eminent writer has published in numerous journals and presented papers at various conferences, notably the National Youth Council Conference on the Recognition of Heroes in 1997. And Dr. Fraser had also been part of the Caribbean Association of Historians. Can't remember the configuration at this point, but through that organization, he also did quite a few lectures across the Caribbean. Of course, we know Dr. Fraser. When I was growing up at Hospital Road, Dr. Fraser, popular program from whence we came was the program to listen to between sometime 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning on NBC Radio before one goes out to school and to work, from whence we came. And it's from that program, lots of students like myself learned a lot and became inquisitive, in addition to what was taught in school. But Dr. Fraser is also one of the historians who is working on a volume on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, along with Dr. Cleve Scott, Dr. Arnold Thomas, and Dr. Gary Michael Denny. And we certainly look forward to the final outcome of that bit of research, which is critical as a revision or let me not get into trouble, but that will be an important piece of research. Doc, as he is affectionately known, is always eager to share his knowledge and has delivered lectures in St. Vincent and across the Caribbean. This husband, father, and grandfather is a sports enthusiast, and particularly he loves West Indies cricket, and Dr. Fraser cherishes his time with family and friends. Please join me then in welcoming to the podium this national treasure that we call Dr. Adrian Fraser.
Good evening, all, and thank you for coming to be part of this conversation, and I hope the next 30, 40 minutes we will be able to share quite a lot. Ronnie did mention doing lectures in the region, and I remembered going to Curacao, and most of the people were not speaking English, so I had to give my lecture to the interpreter. And when I'm there listening to her, I'm not sure if she's saying what it was. And in the end, I simply said I was dealing with, they were trying to, it was a group trying to go into independence. In fact, there were about 1,000 people there. And so at the end of it, I said, you would never be able to swim if you stand on the land. And everybody jumped up, and I realized some of them understood English. And when I checked again, there were a few Vincentians in the crowd. Over the years, I have kept notes of many of the lectures and presentations I've given. And while preparing for this evening's lecture, I opened a file and found notes I'd made for an address at the ceremony at the obelisk at Dorsetshire Hill on March 14th. At the bottom of the card was written, "Now a holiday." And when I checked, I realized this was a lecture delivered in 2001. And I was completely surprised I'd forgotten all of that. So I want to start by referring to what I said on that occasion. Yeah, I congratulated the National Youth Council for having struggled for so long to bring this day about, to bring that day about. Of course, it was not the only group involved, because you had service organizations, unions, the National Trust, and others. And those efforts in 2001 seemed to be bearing fruit. I also complimented the Prime Minister then, Annie Eustace, for taking the initiative and bringing on board what was certainly long overdue. It was my hope that the national holiday then in 2001 would...
The SVG Drum Association is here to do a cultural piece for us, and we'll ask them to...
Most of us probably do not remember that the first March 14th holiday was in 2001. The year before Châtelet was officially declared the first national hero. On March 8, 2002, Searchlight's editorial stated, and I quote, "On his accession to the office of Prime Minister, Annie Eustace did at last concede to the national demand for rectification, and last year we had our first public holiday on March 14. Elections were then but a fortnight away. The elections brought a new government into office, and they formalized the declaration of Châtelet as the first national hero. Two questions I posed then and will address later: why a National Heroes Day, and why was Châtelet our first national hero? Now, to put this in perspective, one has to look at the struggles of the indigenous people to defend their land against the British conquest in a period when colonization in the region was already in motion. After a 30-year struggle in St. Vincent, the British became victorious. Although this was the last struggle by the indigenous people, we have to remember that it started very much earlier and was much longer in the region, with the Kalinagos, particularly in Dominica and St. Vincent, assisting their brothers in the Greater Antilles, and particularly in the Leeward Islands, in the Lesser Antilles, from encroachment both by the British and French. The Kalinagos, as I said, joined their Dominica brothers, and by the end of the late 17th century, we had escaped African slaves, from whom emerged the Garifuna people, the Garinago. Hilary Beckers reminded us that the Kalinagos had fought against slavery and colonization for over 300 years. A struggle, he says, that remains impressive in the annals of American history. So that struggle in St. Vincent was the last phase of that 300-year struggle. And then it was led by the Garifuna people, which was the dominant group in St. Vincent in 1763 when the British took control of St. Vincent. The struggle ended in 1796 when captured indigenous people and those who surrendered were sent to Baliso to be held until preparations were completed for their exile to Roatan of Honduras in Central America. And I need to explain, because I keep getting this question asked all the time. Explain the terms Kalinago and Garifuna. We all were accustomed to yellow and black Caribs. And particularly the black Caribs was something deliberately pushed by the British because they wanted, when they came to St. Vincent, the Kalinagos, the yellow Caribs, were few in numbers. They had died because of their long struggles over the years, and some of them had even migrated. So the dominant force were the Garifuna. And so the Kalinagos, or what are called yellow Caribs, that was what they called themselves. And I'll say something later on about the word Carib. And the Garifuna was a mixture of the escaped or African slaves and the so-called yellow Caribs, or the Kalinago. Now Joseph Palacio of Belize, himself a Garifuna, said, and I quote, "One final note on cultural identity is that I have studiously avoided including biological characteristics, especially color of skin, as a marker. It is obvious that color is not a marker or identity for thousands of Aboriginal peoples, given the overwhelming mixing they have undergone for 500 years. So he is making the point that you cannot look at somebody and say, that person is yellow and this person is black. He said they have mixed for over 500 years. So when I refer to the struggles of the indigenous people, I'm really referring to the Garifuna, because by then they were really one people. The Garifuna, when they emerged, or when the escaped African slaves went to live with the Kalinago, one of the things they did was to adopt a lot of the customs of the Kalinago. Nancy Gonzalez, an anthropologist who has done a lot of work in Central America, said that by the middle of the 18th century, they were really one people. There was really nothing to separate them. And Christopher Taylor, in his book, The Black Carib War, stated, and I quote, "The Black Caribs were quickly indistinguishable from yellow Caribs in terms of dress, diet, language, and lifestyle. They even adopted the Carib practice of head deformation." And I make this point because sometimes I meet somebody and say, but I'm not Garifuna, I am yellow Caribou. So I said, you can't look at somebody and say that they are. And fearing capture, that is when the war ended in 1796, fearing capture, many of them who escaped exile moved into the interior where they established their own settlements. One of the settlements we know for sure was Greg's, but there were other settlements. There was one instance in an area called Lapitan, which is in the Spring Village area, when somebody from the Hope Estate, which is in the Bookament area, a slave, 21-year-old, had escaped and found herself in this small community made up largely of Garifuna people. They blindfolded her because they weren't sure if she would go and let out their secret. She lived there for some time with them and eventually escaped. And when she went back to her estate, they were questioning her. And when she described the settlements which these people had, the kind of houses and so on, they were really astonished. And in particular, they found out that two of those settlements were near to plantations, and they were struck. And their strategy at that time was to get the estates to provide them with slaves, with African slaves, to go and find these people. And I never heard anything of that particular thing, and I'm sure that they would have destroyed them. So there were those who escaped, went into the mountain. We know for Greg's, but we also have evidence of them being elsewhere. But many of them were allowed to live on settlements, providing they supplied the labor for the plantation owner. And a good example of this is the Grand Sable Estate, where we know about the Black Point Tunnel. The Black Point Tunnel was built in order to get the sugar from the Georgetown area over to the Byron area, which was supposed to be calmer. And the persons who performed, who were able to take the sugar from the shore to the ships outside were the Garifuna people. And so a number of them were allowed to live on the estates, provided they supplied labor to the estate. Now, after the exile and after the war was finished, the lands of the Garifuna were taken over to form 8 estates. And St. Vincent, we have to also remember that in 1763, when the British conquered St. Vincent, all of the other islands, Barbados and those other islands, had been producing sugar for quite a long time. So, however, after they took over the Garifuna lands, by 1812, St. Vincent had not only become a slave society rather than a society of slaves. And I say that because a slave society, all the laws were formed for that particular purpose. And by that time, St. Vincent became the second producer of sugar in the Caribbean outside of Jamaica, which showed the importance of the Garifuna lands. Within 5 or 6 years, they were able to produce so much that they were one of the top producers until the 1820s. So, once slavery ended, physical violence, which was administered during slavery by the whip, was replaced by psychological and ideological control. The church, the school, and the media imposed values and supplied the colonized population with their heroes and preached the superiority of British civilization, making the people ashamed of whom they were as they sought to divide and rule. So once the whip was removed, the schools, the churches were supposed to be preaching British civilization and controlling them through that. And I'll say something more about this. Now, the issue of cannibalism, which we do not hear much about, remained with the Kalinago for quite a long time. Kim Johnson, in an article entitled Notes on the Caribbean Holocaust, stated that, and I quote, "The story was spread in the 16th century that some Dominican Caribs, after eating a Spanish friar, all fell ill. Thereafter, the Spaniards, whenever they stopped off at Carib Islands, they made sure to dress their sailors in sackcloth, just in case. That is the uniforms which the friars were supposed to be using. The Caribs, it was thought, found the Spaniards to be stringy and grisly, in contrast with the French, who were rather delicious, and the Dutch, who tended to be fairly tasteless." A French priest, Pierre Labat, who was familiar with the Caribs in Dominica intimately in the 1770s, said, if there were Caribs in those days, why are they not Caribs? If they were cannibals in those days, why are they not cannibals now? I've certainly not heard of them eating people, not even the English with whom they had always been fighting. So if they weren't eating the English, they weren't eating anybody else. A Barbadian scholar, Richard Moore, in a book entitled Caribs, Cannibals, and Human Relations, stated that on a Caribbean lecture tour, he visited the museum in Antigua and saw inscribed in a poster in bold letters the following, and I quote, "The Caribs, unlike the Arabs from the north, were fierce fighters and cannibals. An old historian records, they have tasted of all the nations which frequent them and affirm that the French are the most delicate and the Spaniards the hardest of digestion." Moore did detailed research on the issue and never found any indication of anyone ever having seen the Caribs eating human flesh. He then appealed to the directors of the Nelson Dockyard in Antigua to remove that very offensive plaque. Now, that kind of information found its way in books, which Vincentian and other Caribbean people had to read in schools. And in fact, up until recently, although the issue of cannibalism was not there, some of the derogatory terms and some of the inhumane things were in some of those books. And so that it was part of a divide and rule strategy, with each group being exposed to negative images of the others. So the Africans came from a barbaric and primitive society and lived in trees. And Tarzan was able to go in and to deal with them. They were brought here as slaves to have them Christianized and exposed to civilization. The East Indians were called coolies, and on certain days, their hair was supposed to smell in a certain offensive way. So those were the kind of images that was part of the divide and rule, and one could see that this had some effect on the system over that. So one could understand why many of the indigenous people denied their own identity and refused to admit that they were Caribs, as they were called then, and even attempted to change their names. One could understand why some of them didn't even want to go to school. And I would say, and I've mentioned this before, that sometime, I think it might have been around 2016, or recently, when a lady from one of those areas, I think she was from Sandy Bay, stopped me once in Kingston. She said, "You would not believe what they're teaching some of those children. My children are there in the school and they are really disturbed by it." She didn't tell me the school, I didn't ask her, but that was 2016. So what was involved was a distortion of our history, where we were objects rather than subjects. They wrote our history, gave us their language, and declared our culture inferior. So National Heroes Day was part of the process of reclaiming our history, of providing us with our own heroes. I am guided on this by an African proverb: until lions have their own historians, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. Now, many of us, the older ones, would remember going to matinee and looking at Tarzan and looking at cowboy movies where the cowboys were dealing with the Indians. And so there were all of those negative images. And when you look back and you imagine the indigenous people having to face that kind of thing. Now, Charles Shepherd, who wrote on behalf of the British planters and others who had participated in the struggles between the British and the indigenous people, the Garifuna, declared Châteauneuf ruthless and sanguinary. Cruelty rather than courage had been his trademark. How then did this villain, as the British described him, rise to become the national hero of an independent St. Vincent and the Grenadines? As we reflect on this, the period of the 1960s to 1980s stand out. Those were the years associated with the Black Power movement and with the movement towards decolonization and independence, when ideas were floating around, people were free to discuss and to think about what lay ahead. The reaction to the refusal to allow Walter Rodney to resume his job as a lecturer in African history at the Mona campus of the university sent shockwaves around the region. New groups sprang up everywhere, discussing not only Black Power and our African past, but looking at the way forward as we move to join those other countries which had already become independent. In 1992, which was the year of the quincentennial of the arrival of Columbus in the region, there was a coming together of the different indigenous groups. They built their connections and began to emphasize the need to recapture their own history. Links were built particularly between the Garifuna in St. Vincent and those in Belize because of the language issue. It was more difficult with Guatemala and Honduras and so on, but Belize, because they spoke English, well, it was much easier to maintain that connection. The theme, Black is Beautiful, had tremendous appeal. Afros and dashikis came into fashion. An interest developed in Africa. Many persons rejected their British names and began to use African names. Kenneth John, in one of his newspaper columns, which he captioned National Heroes Day, argued that Chatelier was enthroned when the Black Power movement opened the floodgates to a new perspective on our history. He made reference to Eddie Griffith naming his daughter Yulu, which was considered one of the names of St. Vincent by the indigenous people, and also Mike Brown, who named his first child Chatelier. So he was giving examples of the impact it was having at that time. The National Youth Council, I felt, has never been given credit for the work they did, because by 2002, everybody accepted that there was only going to be one national hero, and that was Chatelier, and the work of the National Youth Council was important. On March 1985, the obelisk at Dorchester Hill was unveiled by Minister of Culture John Horn, who gave the feature address. Junior Bacchus of the National Youth Council chaired that event. The government of Venezuela provided the plaque for the obelisk. Promise then was made to have a statue of Chatelier to be erected, it was said, on some conspicuous place in Kingstown. And the Venezuelan government was to assist in its production. That has so far never bore fruit. Now, the laying ceremonies at the obelisk, which we have now regularly, the National Youth Council had been doing that for over 10 years before Chatelier was a national hero. And that is why I said they have never really been given credit for what they did. And I could say this because I participated in a lot of activities. A number of years I've gone to, particularly to Sandy to speak to the people there at the old school. And I think I went to Greg's at least once or twice. So Chatelier was by that time, even before 2002, acclaimed as national hero by the people of the country. Now, a note I have said that at that gathering in 1985, a large group of Carib country residents traveled the long distance to witness the unveiling. So at least you had people there coming to be part of that. But who is a national hero, and why is there a need for a national hero? I quote from what I had written in 2002. I quote, "A national hero is a national role model and a national symbol. The declaration of a national hero is part of the process of reconstructing our history and defining our identity. St. Vincent and the Grenadines recovered its independence on October the 27th, 1979. When I speak about independence, I speak about us recovering our independence, because we were independent before. So what we did in 1979 was to recover our independence. The country got a new national anthem, a new flag, and a governor general instead of a governor. There were other changes that were merely symbolic. The system that was inherited remained basically a colonial one. The real meaning of independence, therefore, has to do with creating a society and a system to fulfill the hopes and aspirations of the people. Independence in 1979 would have given the country more space to begin to do that. A transformation needed to be made also from a colonial people to a people with their own identity as defined by them. Central to the colonial order was the education system that preached the values of Britain and adherence to colonial control. Our heroes through that system were British. Independence therefore demanded that we create our own hero, or heroes, persons who can act as national role models and inspire our people by their feats and by what motivated them and by the conditions under which they did. Kenneth John, in an article which I quoted from earlier, remarked, "As a young nation, we do need national heroes to act as an inspiration and beacon of hope, especially in times of crisis and threatening despair. Luckily, we can draw strength and sustenance from the Carib peoples, our forebears, who demonstrated courage, defiance, and rebellion in a constant struggle to gain and maintain their freedom." Now, the Order of National Heroes Act 2002 was assented to by the Governor General, then Sir Charles Antrobus, on February 25, 2002. The criteria for making one a national hero reads as follows, and I deliberately put this down because a lot of people, every year when you talk about having people as national heroes, people just pull a hat out of the bag without knowing what is the criteria for national hero. And I have something further to say on that. So, in determining the criteria for making one a national hero reads as follows. In determining the qualification, the committee, the National Heroes Advisory Committee, shall have regard to whether that person, A, has given outstanding service to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and his contribution, and I guess his or, has altered positively the course of the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. B, has given service to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which has been exemplified by visionary and pioneering leadership, extraordinary achievement, and the attainment of the highest excellence, which has redounded to the honor of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or has through his heroic exploits and sacrifice contributed to the improvement of the economic, social, or political conditions of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Vincentians generally. Then the person has to be dead. No living person could become a national hero. Well, we know in some of the other countries, Barbados, they have a living national heroes. In fact, one of our persons from beyond the river, as they say, from Elma Francois, was made a national hero in Trinidad. She walked, after the eruption, she went to Sand Hill, lived with her mother, walked on plantations in Sand Hill and Annisvale, and later on, she arrived in Montbentic. I wasn't sure how she got there, but she started to organize the workers at Montbentic and was fired. She then came back to Kingston and apparently made contact with George McIntosh, and they had known each other for the short period she was there. She eventually went to Trinidad, I think she was about 22, and became involved in the workers' movement in Trinidad and became a national heroine of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, one suspects that when you read this criteria, it's really a difficult one to fill, and I'm not sure how many persons could become national heroes when you look at that. And I suspect that when that criteria was written, it was on the understanding that McIntosh, that Chatelier was going to be national hero. They seem not to be thinking beyond that. So Chatelier was able to fill into that, but I'm sure, well, everybody knew by the time that thing was written, that Chatelier was going to be nationally used. Chatelier might have been a villain to the British planters and officials, but he inspired us, that is Vincentians, by his actions. Outstanding leader of his people, he was a warrior, strategist, and diplomat. As I said elsewhere, his was not cowardly acquiescence, but of struggle and determination. His was a physical struggle against an enemy with superior technology and means. But it was more than Chatelier. His resistance and leadership reflected his people's aspirations and hopes as they fought alongside and continued the fight even after Chatelier died. Now, I just want to emphasize the question of superior technology and means. From about 1768 until 1796, Chatelier and his people were fighting against the British with all their technology and so on, and that really says something. But it was not only Chatelier, it was his people. These people became disconnected in 1797. Some were sent into exile. Many died in the inhospitable environment of Baliso, which was used as a holding ground, and others evaded exile and moved into the interior. Those who remained were subjected to the cultural bomb that frequently destroyed their image and culture. And I really want to read this bit from an African author, and every time I read it, I remember the indigenous people. He says, the oppressed and exploited people of the earth maintain their defiance, liberty from theft. But the biggest weapon wielded and actually daily unleashed by imperialism against their collective defiance is the cultural bomb. The effect of a cultural bomb is to annihilate a people's belief in their names, in their languages, in their environment, in their heritage of struggle, in their unity, in their capacities, and ultimately in themselves. And when you read that and you think of the indigenous people, what they went through, it applied definitely to them. It makes them see their past as one wasteland of non-achievement. The only people who were supposed to have achieved something were the British through their civilization, but they who were there before were made to feel that they come from a wasteland. It makes them want to identify with that which is furthest removed from themselves. For instance, with other people's languages rather than their own. And I said, every time I read this, I think of the situation which they might have been in. So, after 1797, scholarly attention was focused on the Garifuna in Central America, and little on the Garifuna remained in St. Vincent. In fact, in recent years, I've begun to do some research on what has happened to those people who remained in St. Vincent. And so scholarly attention was focused on Central America. There were only two exceptions. C.J.M. Gulick in 1985, who had come to St. Vincent and written about his experience, and Paul Twin in 2007. But apart from the scholars, attention from SVG also focused on Central America, particularly Belize, in an effort to get them to teach the language and culture that we figured we had lost. Very little was done to look at the history and culture of those who remained here. Now, I have some differences with what is going on about the history and the language. Culture is not something you can pick up and transfer elsewhere. That's not culture. Culture is something which evolves. Culture grows out of the environment, the landscape, and as people relate to each other. That is how, and so culture evolves. And so you can't pick up and say, we have lost the culture, bring it back here. It doesn't make sense at all. But there's a sense in which something could be done, and I'll mention something about that. Culture is a way of life. It is much broader than dance and song and festivals. Culture is not static, it evolves. It evolves over time as people interact with the environment and other peoples in that environment. Anthropologist Nancy Gonzalez, in an article entitled "The Garifuna in Central America," writes, and I quote, "Thus, the culture of the Garifuna today," and she's speaking about Central America, "is like the people a hybrid. For centuries, they have accepted new ideas, goods, and habits, molding them into their own purposes, and in so doing, preserving their distinctive identity, an identity which when they left St. Vincent, they were able to mix with other groups there, and coming out of that, you have a cultural identity. It is to this ability to acquire and then transform the new into the traditional, making it particularly their own, that I attribute their remarkable success," speaking about Central America. In her book, Ethnogenesis and Ethnohistory of the Garifuna, she wrote, I quote, "As the early immigrants moved," that is the immigrants, the people who were exiled from St. Vincent, "moved from place to place, seeking peace and a better way of life, they freely absorbed other people and their cultural traits. Naturally, the resulting culture contains elements that can be traced back to the island Caribs in St. Vincent. It would be strange if it did not," end of quote. Language is an essential part of culture, but language is a living thing. To speak of introducing the Garifuna language in schools doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, how are they going to deal with that? Who are they going to be speaking to? I mean, I did some conversation in Spanish and so on at university, but there's nobody to speak to after that, so you begin to lose that. Will it be accepted by CXC if it's the intention to move it further up the ladder? In Belize and other Garifuna-speaking countries, the language is under threat in the global village. And having been in Belize, there's a lot of Spanish, there's a lot of English, and some of the communities are trying to have their language survive. As we develop our tourism here, there will likely be a demand for tour guides and hotel workers to speak the languages of the expected visitors. Even history is finding it difficult to be firmly placed in the school's curriculum. So I'm saying even getting it onto the school's curriculum is going to be in itself a problem. And getting CXC to, especially if you're only dealing with St. Vincent, Belize, what happened to the other countries? So it's something which I don't think will be done. Language is obviously an essential part of culture. I can, however, find a place for it outside the school's curriculum. And it is in an area of what I call domestic tourism, centered in the communities. And let me use as an example, OEA has recovered, rebuilt a gunpowder magazine that was built around 1772, 1773 by the British. I'm saying a narrative can be built around this. There's a story that could be built around this. It can be used to attract visitors on special occasions. On such occasions, students or young people who were given the opportunity to learn the language could sing the national anthem in the Garifuna language, greet visitors in the language. Dances could be done by community dancers. And there will be other communities having relics, symbols of that past around which a narrative could build. And I'm saying that you bring people there so that these people who are speaking the language, the young children, would then be able to use it on those occasions and when you have other special occasions. But when you're saying, let us get it in the schools and so on, and the parent who wants a child to get out of school and to do subjects which would ensure that they get a job, they're going to have difficulty in doing that. So, but there's a way I'm saying in this domestic tourism that you could do that and everybody would benefit. The community itself would then benefit from it and will pride itself on protecting it. It is then about recreating some historical space in which the language and aspects of the culture make sense. Unfortunately, no effort has been done or made to look at the input of the Garifuna in the broad Vincentian culture. And I think there's a lot there. And every time I look at people catching treachery, how they catch treachery here is the same way they caught treachery in the 1770s, and we have a description of how they caught. So when I saw that and I read this thing, I'm saying, you know, this is treachery, same way that it was done by the Kalinago people. The culinary skills centered around the use of arrowroot, cassava, has been central to the food of the ancestors. And I remember my grandmother preparing some of that stuff, which I always like. Their skills in basket making, boat building, and in a multiplicity of other things would have impacted on the country. And the British, after a while, the British wrote that they were so skilled in basket making that you could hold water in their baskets. And when they represented St. Vincent on different occasions at imperial exhibitions, and one in particular in Jamaica in 1891, they were the talk of the country. Their tents were visited on more than one occasion by the Governor General and his wife. They even gave them a gift after. They put on an exhibition of how they were doing these things, and everybody was impressed. So I'm saying there was a lot coming out, but we have never really paid much attention or given it much support. So what next? Chatelier as a national hero. There's a lot more to be done. There isn't even a statue of Chatelier. Get a statue before you think of having another national hero. And I'm beginning to think of now, National Heroes Day is centered around people just want to go to beyond the river to eat everything. So I imagine 3 or 4 national heroes on National Heroes Day. I'm not sure how they go because everything is going to be centered there again. But there's a lot more. A lot of people still do not know as much as they can about Chatelier. One of the questions I keep getting all the time is, somebody said, I do not believe there was ever a Chatelier. The reason he didn't believe it is because there's nobody in St. Vincent named Chatelier. So I explained to him that we know Chatelier had a son who participated in the struggle. After Chatelier was killed, his son was this. In fact, his son is listed on the list of people going to Roatan. But a number of them were killed. Many of them refused to declare their identity. And some of them went into exile. So it doesn't say, there are a lot of people who were in St. Vincent, and their names don't exist there, not only Chatelier alone, but we know. And in fact, recently, Joseph Palacio from Belize, they did some research, and through their oral history, found a woman who was a descendant of a daughter of Chatelier who had gone into exile. And she, that woman, over the years was able to relate the story, and the story was handed down in that particular family. So they have the name of at least one person named after, who was a daughter of Chatelier. Now, around the time of when Chatelier was declared national hero, there were some people who were annoyed One, it was somebody from that area, but he was dressed in loincloth. And that is the image that was handed down to us. But I remember in particular that Sir William Young said that he was visited by Chatelier and Duvalier, and they were well dressed. When he said they were well dressed, what did he mean? You know, and that is something, he didn't say anything, but they were well dressed. So that is a question that needed answering. So, Chatelier in loincloth, that is the image that was handed down to us. There's a lot more work to be done, and I feel that even the artists could come up with their own, reading what they have come up with could answer that particular question in their own way. Now, I have been speaking about this for quite a long time, and I want to end here. I am suggesting that before we name other national heroes, let us have a system of honors. There are a lot of people who have made significant contributions to St. Vincent in all areas of life, but who could never become a national hero. Why don't we honor those people? I'm not sure if we still give MBs and OBs, but let us have a system where we identify people in different categories who have made a contribution to their communities and to others, and have a system of honors. So that when you ask for people to be national heroes, you don't think of Miss Jacobs out there who does something good, that she should become a national hero. She could become a she could have an honor based on what she's doing. So I think that is something that should come next. Rather than another national hero, let us have a system of honors where we honor people who have made a contribution. And remember, a national hero, you could only be a national hero when you're dead. But if you have an honor system, then you are alive and you're able, and people could relate to you, they see what you're doing, and so on. So the question of what next is, let us finish, give Chatelier what he deserves, give him a statue, make sure that he's better understood. You know, the thing is that every March 14, there's a big hooray, Chatelier and Chatelier. And after that, there's nothing. So there's a lot of work there to be done. And let us then concentrate on a system of honors and forget having other national heroes at this particular time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fraser. So much meat to be digested. Dr. Fraser talked about the various challenges of the perception of Chatelier and the whole history, but most of all, calling for persons to be honored. And that's so important that we find a system where we can honor persons. We're going straight into the discussion. We're getting into the meat of the matter. So, Dr. Fraser's here, the brilliant mind, and we want persons to share what their views are in terms of the discussion, the meat that he has shared with us today. So, who would be the first person? Yes, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. I want to appreciate what Doc would have presented. I felt like I was back in university, you know, receiving this very healthy, very positive presentation. And I want to use the opportunity also to commend the organizers again for doing a great job. Doc, I agree with you 100%, everything that you said tonight, right? I have a question to ask, and I also want to make a recommendation. If Is it possible to have a national hero in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that is also a national hero in another island? And I know you mentioned Elma Franco, because she's originally from here. And there's something in our honor in Trinidad, the Elma Franco Institute, and it promotes a lot about trade unionism and so on. And it's a very rich piece of history. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. And we also have Sierra Baptiste over the Dry River. Because I've been doing some little research in especially the role of women and how women contribute to, you know. I haven't heard much about Rosebank. That's where I'm from. And I'm not saying that because I'm from there. But growing up in Rosebank, we learned about Jim Augustus Roberts, who was a chief of the Caribs. He actually came from Sandy Bay, because my grandparents told me they used to go up over the Lasso Fray, and they were involved in bartering. They would go over to exchange fish for ground provision. Jim Augustus Roberts was a chief of the Caribs in Rosebank. And his son, who died about 10 years ago, 10 or, I'm coming to the point. I need to make this point very important. He had the flintstone that they used to catch a fire, right? Somebody went there and stole it. Went to visit him because he became blind. And his father had the book with the genealogy of the Caribs. And we were told it was given to E.T. Joshua. Nobody knew exactly. He had a special chair he used to sit in. We don't know if it ended up in the House of Parliament or where. Right? And that was one of the identity of an indigenous community. You had a chief that was living with the people. He actually took the strip point, we call it Penguin, from that side over to that area.
Okay.
And finally, he had a boat called a Sibi, for us to go around St. Vincent and Grenadines in that boat. But I agree with the point, it's difficult to get the language in the school because some of the communities, where you have Garifuna being spoken, you know, really, it's a big challenge to have it in schools. But I thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, the question of having the same person nationally, I don't think that would come up, because the national hero would be the impact you have in a particular country. So even though the person might have come from St. Vincent, it is where they really made the impact. And in the case of Elma Franco, it was in Trinidad. I hardly think you'll have another case. And just about Rosebank, Rosebank was very, in fact, the persons who were sent to Monronde in 1805, there was always a question with them. A number of them went to Rosebank when they were affected by the eruption and by the storms and so on, and there was always that talk there. So we know that a number of them were there with the other people who were living there.
Okay, next. Patricia, please. So we can hear you.
Yes, just to make a comment on what you said about not being too easy to get into school. I disagree, sir, because it's in the school. We have a festival, as you know, Garifuna Foundation have a festival with the Ministry of Education and Government, and it is held at the park. But sadly, many of us here don't go to see or hear. But this year, we had preschoolers right up from different areas in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and my God, you should see them perform and hear them say the national anthem and play pieces of the Garifuna language. You would think they were living then. So, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say to take first the scenario where the hero of Venezuela is also the hero of Colombia. So there could be, based on the war, okay? So there could be possibility, but you can't get a scenario with Elmer Franza because she didn't do enough, okay, we could see. And the other thing is, I agree with Mr. Fraser. I see after school club community link because I see the importance of we trying to erect the Garifuna awareness among our people. But we have to take into consideration our history and the effect of the Columbus volcanic eruption. We create a new scheme of thing, enslave we black people, dominate the Kalinago people, and create a system, a slave system, and a process of civilization we call Western civilization. And you have in St. Vincent, that was past history when they enslaved us. They have a new breed of generation, a multi-ethnic society in most of the Caribbean. So I agree to identify with the Kalinago, with the African and the Kalinago, but I also want to identify and build one homogeneous people, a fusion people, because we can't chop up the Caribbean, we can't chop up the European man, the great ancestor in slavery, and he come and live among me. We can't run the Indian, so we have to find a way to build a post-colonial society. I see it coming from a German point of view, from the German point of view. We promoting an Afro-Garinago volcanic nation. The volcanic means the other small minority among we fuse, because when the volcano erupt, you level over and we fuse everything into one. Because we are in a search of trying to define who we are as a people, and we at Vincentian had to evolve as a people, a fusion people, spreading a message and trying to make our country happy and our people happy.
Let's try to keep it some questions as well. Thank you very much, Doctor. But I will agree with some of the research that you did, and I want to thank you for your intensive research. But to say that it is difficult to get the language into the schools, I don't agree with that, because we have many different culture, different villages in the Indians, the native Indians in Canada, the Aboriginal. There was the Oneida the Oneida language. There was the Yukon ones have their own language. Everybody had their own language. It depends on the community that they grew in. And when I went to university, I had the opportunity to learn some of the Oneida language, because what we were told is that there is no history without your language. So, where there is a will, there will be a way. If we want to have that language in our school, because we are talking about our future generation, if we eliminate that language, what are we teaching them? How to dance only? How to perform? We want them to know something. I mean, in St. Vincent, we used to learn Spanish. We used to learn French, even though we didn't have anyone to speak it to. We still learn a bit of it. I can say, "Come on, stop." And we can't say nothing in our own native language. So we need to teach it in our school. Find a way to put it in, even if it's after school program.
As an agent in tourism, dealing directly with the cruise ships, I tell the story just about every single day. Especially when I go to Bequia, I go to Mount Pleasant, there is Bantawea, there is Balisau. Okay? You have talked about the year where our ancestors were taken from mainland. can you just repeat that year for me, please? Because I think we all have different years, and we tell the story a little different, which it should not be. If it is history, as it is, it should be told the same. So can you just repeat that year for me, please? Yes, please.
1787.
Thank you.
That information, thank you so much. Straight from the horse's mouth.
Good evening, all. Dr. Fraser, I want to thank you so much for being able to do the work that you do after so many years. I thank you, and I'm not saying it to Mama you in any way, I think you're a treasure. I like the way you said that what did we do with our independence? We recovered. I've never heard it like that before. So I want to commend you on that. Now, the matter of English, no, before I do that, I'm still not clear about how we should see ourselves as a nation. For example, if you look at Israel, the Jewish people say it's theirs. So I don't see why St. Vincent and the Grenadines cannot be declared European. What's your view on that? The third question, or second question, I would like you to explain further what you meant by saying that the Garifuna language was difficult to introduce in schools, because if we introduced it, I want to know how many parents would want their children to study a language that was not tested. And I do not believe that the Garifuna language should be one that is tested. So I want to hear your view on that. What exactly did you mean when you said it would be difficult? Thanks.
No, the issue of schools, and that is one of my criticism of what is happening with education. A lot of students go into school not to learn, to make sure they get a certificate and they get a job. And many of the parents are behind that. There are days when we'll do hygiene and all those things which had practical things, but today you look at someone, history, for instance, people come and say, well, what could I do with history? So the question of what you could do with it. And I'm saying in that kind of situation, for people who are not part of the Garifuna thing, to get that in all of the schools, and where you're going, are you going to be tested in it? And are you going to be taking up time? There are whole sort of things with CXC. From the time students get into school now, they start looking at CXC, and everything is built around, so it's a real difficult kind of climate. And this is why I'm centering it around issues in the community, relating particularly to tourism, because that's where we are going. And I'm saying that you could get the language built around this, and it will make sense to a lot of people, because they'll see how they could use. So you go in and you learn the Garifuna language, but some of the students around, you could speak to them, but are we able to read anything? There are a lot of questions, and parents who fighting to get money to send their children to school, they're going to have problems. Say, what are we going to do with that? So I'm raising that as a particular issue, so I find some difficulty in doing that.
Okay, Dr. Fraser, looking at the practicality of things. Let's see.
Newton George. Good night, everybody. Doc, the language, how did it begin? How did it change? The European came in, met people who were fishermen, they were farmers, they were boat builders, they were woodcutters, had a civilization, and you crushed it. You brought in the churches, the Roman Catholic, the Anglican, and also the Methodists, to teach us the English language. How destructive that is, Doc, to a nation. That is my question.
Now, in terms of the language, we know up to the 1870s there were people in St. Vincent who could speak the Garifuna language. But you have isolated communities. You have some people who are refusing to admit that they're Garifuna simply because of the stigma and the way they were viewed. So there's no encouragement there to continue with the language, and you're living in a community, you go to school and you have to learn English. So it was a difficult atmosphere to continue the language. And even the names, like some of the Indians, when they went to school, they had to change their names. So there were a lot of problems, and I'm saying, given what is happening with education, I see very difficulty in having that. I mean, you might have classes there, but you have after-school classes and so on. You know, there are ways of doing that, but to have it on the curriculum, I think you would have difficulty.
Oh, Doc, good evening, everyone. Just quickly, I support you in the need for reaffirming and centering Chateaubriand as the center of our history, of our people. Because I've been observing for a while. I came up in the generation of the persons in the National Youth Council who proposed Joseph Chateaubriand. Well, Chateaubriand, something I want to ask you, where did the Joseph come from? Something I question seriously. I have had a lot of interaction with the Garifunas who came to study where I was a post in Havana from Honduras. And those peoples, they accepted my embassy as their own. They even wanted their university degrees stamped by the St. Vincent embassy. And they all came after they graduated and had their certificate stamped. For them it is furthering their authenticity, their belonging. So when I've heard arguments about, sad arguments, which are sometimes very political and politically got reactions to whether Garifunas should be given citizenship or honorary citizenship, it's really a non-argument to me. The Jews don't have a problem with their people belonging to Jerusalem, the place that they call Jerusalem now. You know, and so it should be the Garifunas. The language issue, which I think is one of the unfortunate things you said, the only one. The language is important. We have a captive market for our tourism because there are thousands, mega thousands of persons who identify. Because like you mentioned before about the whole Garifuna, it's not about the physical characteristics. I wear t-shirts and say proudly, I'm proud to be Garifuna. I'm not asking anybody to test any DNA or what percentage of my blood is Garifuna. Garifuna is a cultural thing, it's a feeling. And I feel Garifuna. I'm not from Greg's, but I'm not even going there. But in terms of celebrating, one last comment quickly. I look at the National Heroes Day activity every year, and I'm saddened when I see it. Not criticizing anybody, but thinking we are a country, we are growing. We have a celebration where Chateaubriand, I don't think he'll be very proud of it. Because even the way I've spoken to some friends of mine, I spoke to the Honorable Fritz Bramble about that the other day. Fritz, I'm not putting you on the spot. Even the mode of dress at what should be a cultural day. We go and we dress in hot sun, in some dark suits. And we've even gone 1 year of naming a Governor General on National Heroes Day. So it's like it's slapping Chateau in his face that we are reaffirming our Britishness on National Heroes Day. I remember one National Heroes Day, a member of the Garifuna of the Kalinago community was given an OBE on National Heroes Day. Not knocking anybody, but saying like we are growing as a people. And as we begin to grow, we have in post-colonial societies, we have contradictions. And I think we can work them through. You know, and over time I hope that we would work through all these things without fighting about it. But in love, pointing out where we're making mistakes and get to it. And finally, sorry to have been so long, I believe in a system of honors, because I've seen, in the absence of a system of honors, what we have begun is what, and I say that very gladly because I was an ambassador from my country, not that I don't want anybody else to be an ambassador. We have begun to call people ambassadors, nothing wrong with it. But if we had a system of honors, we would have a clear criteria, system of designation why somebody, you get the National Honor Chatouillet, the honor of Amazona Gildingi for heroism, the honor something for literature, that kind of thing. And I think as a people growing, that's where we eventually get to. Thanks.
Let me just, you mentioned something, but you didn't continue it. The question of Joseph.
Yeah, where that came from?
No, I have never seen Joseph in any kind of document, because they call him Duvalet, Chatouillet, and so on. I've never seen, I don't know where Joseph came from.
Just quickly, Doc, I noticed in my interaction with the Garinawa brethren from Honduras, one of them now graduated, and he's now the Minister of Education, of Science and Technology. Dr. Luther Castillo was really saddened that he didn't come with his president to the CELAC meeting, because they never call Chatouillet Joseph. It's always simply Chatouillet. And one final thing, I found out that Gary Funa, and you're a historian, you can find it out. Africans call cassava Gary, and the name Gary Funa I understood because they're the cassava eating peoples.
Okay, let me get it. Very quickly.
I just want to make add, because adding to and trying to underline what you said in terms of meaning and significance. When we talk about Chatouillet and the Black Caribs and Garifuna, putting them in a historical context, St. Vincent was the last island where a Native Caribbean, a Native American language was spoken. It was spoken from before Columbus until 1797, when they deported all. So that is significance and the meaning of us gathering here. Now to underline what I'm saying, the very geography we in here, this used to be a modest Carib settlement. A lot of the cities and towns today in the Americas start as modest American Indian settlement. Ottawa, Quito, Mexico City, St. Vincent, Kingston itself, because Kingston, the Caribs called Kingston, it was a village, Ushigudi. That other, where you even from is a Carib settlement, Leyu. They have a Leyu place name in Dominica. The Native American Indian language for the last 500 years has been taking a battering. Some of the language has been extinct and not been documented. It's only 2 countries in the Americas that Native American language is official and legal. I think Paraguay and Bolivia. Let me go to Belize. Belize, Garifuna is speaking in Belize. But the Constitution of Belize says the national language is English. The language of education in Belize is English. But Garifuna is spoken in, and so it may the Maya language is speaking in Belize, but both Garifuna and Maya is second-class language. Everybody have a better
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Doc, thank you very much for that interesting answer. And I wish you a long life because you have a big role to play as we determine how we go forward. From the lively discussion we're having, I would say that this has been a fruitful evening. And I'm hoping that in the next 12 to 15 months we'll be having a lot more discussions here as we determine how we are to go forward from this critical state we are in. Now, I agree with you wholeheartedly that we should have a system for honoring persons. You don't have to fight to look for heroes. We wouldn't find many of those. We have a system of honor, and for some months, for some years now, I have considered that it would be a good thing if we rehabilitate that nice wall around the Anglican Church and put on it suitable busts of the distinguished people who have made distinguished contributions to our society. That's number one. And there have been a lot of women who would fit nicely into that program. Now, I am hopeful also. Out of these discussions, I expect, if we had, probably because the other part of this discussion here, if we had the authority here tonight to determine what is to be done next, I would have suggested that we have a place not too far from here on which we could put Chatelier's statue near to town, very impressive site, etc., and have it to accommodate gatherings of a couple of hundred people. Thank you very much, Doc.
I'm not sure that you did address the notion of a UMA state, number one, and number two. I see that there's a distinct difference. There's a difference between history and language. And I think the time is long overdue for us to be taught our history. What is your view? The difference between the two.
The difference between
the history and the language. Introducing it in schools.
Oh, okay. No, I raised that point simply because of the problems you are having in the schools now. For one, the attitude of people to history, they see no sense in history except you're going to be able to teach. But also, there is this question of what are we going to do? What are we going to do with it after? So a lot of people go into things where they figure they'll get a job easier. So there are all of those complexities that come into this whole issue. And it's not like the days when you would take a subject in school, which, and I mentioned things like hygiene, which meant something to you, you know. And now it's doing a subject where I could get a job, you know. So the question with the question of Israel, I mean, nothing that Israel we could ever think of doing. Okay, so I wouldn't even say that Israel has done that, and you know, I wouldn't deal with that at all. I mean, Israel is getting away with so much today, you wonder.
Pleasant good night to everybody here, and I would like to thank you for this, what you have delivered tonight. It has inspired me, and I hope it inspires persons. I'm glad to know that today was when Humalza, which is for somebody listening from what you said, might not be a national hero because his work was done outside, but he has impacted globally and, well, St. Vincent too. But I like us to promote Human Zach. I don't know what you will say if it's not a national hero, where you might fit him in the whole scheme of things. I heard you mention a point about the National Youth Council. I was around in that time when the Reed Lane came into being, because it had times that was not on the program. And I think then, we script it off of what usually happen on Memorial Day. So I don't know if you still think the Reed Lane still should be a part of that ceremony that we have. I mean, as somebody mentioned, sometimes when you see what person's the outfit that they go up there with, seeing that we break in from the colonial master, sometimes it really surprises you, you know. But also, as you mentioned, in terms of doing more work in relation to Chate, like for years now, we're talking about a national park for Chate at before you go over the Dry River at Ravaka, and nothing has been done with that for years, and we say now we're going to be Chate Park. So I think more things need to be done in relation to Chate around St. Vincent and Grenadines. And as we're talking now about acquiring, buying body soap, that's another discussion. So again, thanks.
That is it for the evening. Dr. Fraser, you want to say anything else? You said quite a lot, quite a lot. All right, so yes, give a round of applause, thank you. All right, so we thank you so much for coming out this evening and for being part of this lovely discussion. Dr. Fraser, thanks for your patience and your kindness, and for just being able to share your true knowledge and genuine knowledge, practicality. All right, thank you so much for coming out. We thank the various distinguished guests and everyone here, those online, the media, Cap Balcom and team, his wife, Ambassador Rose, you were outside. We thank you as well for coming, and we ask that all please get home safely, and once again, happy Easter and Lenten season. God bless.